The church smelled like lilies and dust. Selene Marlowe stood at the altar, barely breathing, her spine straight like someone being held up by fear alone. The lace of her dress scratched at her skin, and the veil, too tight around her pinned curls, felt more like a noose than a symbol of purity. Around her, the townspeople whispered behind fans and polite smiles, pretending not to notice the tremble in her hands. Across from her stood Elias Crowe, tall, broad-shouldered, with sunburnt skin and a suit that looked borrowed. He didn't smile. He didn't move. His eyes were calm, but distant, like a man fulfilling a duty he didn't ask for. Selene hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to him since the engagement was forced on them both. This wasn't about love. It was about reputation, control, and a mother who refused to let shame stain the family name. Vera Langdon, Selene's mother, watched from the front pew like a hawk. Her lips were pressed into a thin, cold line. She had orchestrated this wedding from the beginning, pushed Selene toward Elias with sweet words and sharp threats. "You need a man who can keep you steady," she had said. What she meant was, you need to forget what you did. You need to bury it. But Selene remembered everything. The pastor began to speak, his voice flat and rehearsed. "Dearly beloved." But Selene barely heard him. Her heartbeat was a drum in her chest. The bouquet in her hands felt like bricks. And just behind her eyes, a memory flickered, soft skin, laughter under the summer sun. A name she could never say aloud again. That name was buried now, along with the truth. Elias cleared his throat, shifting his weight. For a moment, their eyes met. He didn't look cruel. He didn't even look hopeful. He looked resigned. That made it worse. Selene felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. Was this her life now? A quiet man, a silent house, and a lie no one would dare speak of? The pastor asked the question. "Do you, Selene Marlowe, take this man?" But before she could answer, the air changed. Not from sound or movement, but from something deeper. A heaviness settled in her chest. She wasn't ready. She might never be. And though her lips didn't move, her silence echoed louder than any vow. The ceremony ended without fanfare. No applause, no music, just the slow shuffle of chairs and murmurs as the guests filtered out into the evening. Selene Marlowe felt numb. Her hands were cold, her eyes dry. She had said the words, "I do." But even as they left her mouth, she wasn't sure they belonged to her. It felt like she had handed over her voice to someone else. And now she didn't know how to ask for it back. Outside the church, the sky had turned a dusty shade of pink. Elias Crowe stood beside her, his hands at his sides, not quite touching her. He didn't try to take her hand. He didn't lean in to speak. He just stood there, watching the last guests disappear into their cars and wagons. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was something heavier, like a truth neither of them wanted to touch. Selene could feel Vera Langdon's gaze burning into her back. Her mother had done her duty. The shame was buried, and the town had seen the wedding. The whispers would fade. But inside Selene, nothing had changed. The secret still lived in her chest like a bruise that hadn't healed. She glanced at her mother, who gave her a tight nod, the kind that said, "Don't ruin this." The ride back to Elias's farmhouse was quiet. The horses clopped along the gravel road as the sun dipped below the trees. Selene sat stiff in the wagon seat, her veil removed but her hair still pinned, her dress too tight across the ribs. Elias kept his eyes on the road, occasionally clearing his throat, but never speaking. It was like they were two strangers forced into the same carriage, carrying separate sorrows they didn't dare share. When they arrived, the house stood in shadows, small, worn, but clean. Elias stepped down first and held out a hand. Selene hesitated before taking it. His grip was gentle, unexpectedly warm. He didn't smile, but he nodded once, as if to say, "You're safe here, for now." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and faint tobacco. There was a fire already lit in the hearth, casting a dull glow across the wooden floor. Selene stood in the middle of the living room, still holding her bouquet, unsure of where to go or what to say. She had never been in this house before. Now it was hers. Now he was her husband. Elias disappeared into the kitchen without a word. The fire crackled. The room felt too quiet. And in that silence, Selene realized something. The wedding was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The night moved slowly inside Elias's farmhouse. Selene stood in the bedroom doorway, still in her wedding dress, her arms crossed tightly around her waist. The room smelled like old wood and linen, clean but unfamiliar. A small oil lamp flickered on the bedside table, casting shaky shadows across the walls. She didn't touch anything. She couldn't. Her suitcases sat untouched by the foot of the bed, like the belongings of someone just visiting, not staying. Down the hallway, she could hear Elias moving in the kitchen. Not loud, just the sound of a single plate, a kettle warming, a floorboard groaning beneath his weight. He hadn't said much since they arrived. He hadn't asked if she was comfortable or hungry. But then again, she hadn't spoken either. They were both trapped in roles they didn't choose, tiptoeing around one another like strangers in a borrowed life. Eventually, Elias appeared in the doorway with a blanket in his arms. "I'll sleep on the sofa," he said, his voice low even. "You can have the room." His eyes didn't linger on her, and there was no edge in his tone. No resentment, no expectation, just tired resignation. Selene nodded slowly, her throat too tight to thank him. He placed the blanket on the hallway chair and turned away. She changed alone, folding the dress with stiff fingers and placing it back into the suitcase as if sealing it away would undo what had happened. She sat on the edge of the bed in her cotton nightgown, staring at the window. Outside, the trees moved gently with the wind. Inside, her heart beat with the dull weight of dread. This wasn't a beginning, it was a sentence. At some point, she heard the front door creak open and shut. She got up, walked barefoot down the dark hallway, and peeked through the window. Elias was sitting on the porch steps, shirt sleeves rolled up, smoking a cigarette in the cold night air. His back was to her, shoulders hunched. He looked like someone used to being alone. Selene watched him for a moment, then stepped back, feeling like an intruder in her own story. She returned to bed, but sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that same image. Elias, silent, smoking in the dark, and herself, behind glass, watching. Two people living under the same roof but breathing in different worlds. As the fire in the hearth slowly died out, one truth settled deep in her bones. This marriage wasn't going to break all at once. It would unravel thread by thread in silence. The morning after the wedding, Selene woke to the smell of coffee and the distant clinking of metal on porcelain. She sat up slowly, eyes still puffy from a night without sleep. The farmhouse was quiet, but not empty. It was a different kind of silence. Not the absence of sound, but the weight of something waiting to be spoken. She put on her robe and followed the scent into the kitchen, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. Elias was at the stove, already dressed, his hair still damp from washing. He didn't look up when she entered. "Coffee's fresh," he said simply, placing a second cup on the table. It was the first full sentence he had spoken since the wedding. Selene stood still for a moment, unsure if she should sit or say thank you. Eventually, she pulled out a chair and nodded, folding her hands in her lap as the cup steamed in front of her. The kitchen was small but orderly. A faded curtain fluttered at the window, and a small calendar on the wall showed the wrong month. Selene let her eyes wander across the space, searching for something to anchor her. A photo, a book, a name written in dust, but there was nothing. This wasn't a house with memories. It was a shelter built for survival. Clean, quiet, closed. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound being the occasional creak of the floor or the distant rustle of wind against the siding. Selene tried to speak twice, but the words dried up before they reached her throat. She didn't know how to ask him anything. Not why he agreed to marry her, not what he really thought of her, not if he knew what her mother had done. Instead, she sipped the bitter coffee and stared into her cup like it might offer answers. Finally, Elias stood. "I've got chores," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "You can rest today, or walk the land if you like." He paused at the door. If you need anything, just ask. Then he was gone, leaving behind the scent of tobacco and soap, and a silence that now felt strangely more personal. Selene sat for a moment longer, heart thudding with something she couldn't name. Not affection, not trust, but something just beneath the surface. After he left, she wandered through the house alone, touching the walls like they might speak to her. In the back hallway, she found a closed door. Not locked, but old, stiff in its hinges. Inside was a small room, dust floating in sunbeams, a single chair by a narrow window, and something folded on the floor. She knelt down, touched the edge. It was a man's coat, not Elias's, and as she held it in her hands, a thought pierced through her fog. Someone else had lived here before, and no one had told her. That afternoon, the sun hung low over the fields, casting long shadows across the land. Selene sat alone in the back room, the one with the folded coat and the faint smell of something old and forgotten. She hadn't meant to stay there so long, but the room pulled at her in a strange way. It felt untouched, sacred almost, like someone had closed the door and never returned. She smoothed her hand over the coat again, then folded it gently and placed it back where she found it. On the windowsill there was a thin layer of dust, and beneath it, something scratched into the wood. She leaned closer, brushing the dust away with her fingers. A name. Sam. Just 4 letters, carved deep and uneven. Not Elias's name, not hers. Someone else. Someone who had once stared out of this same window, maybe feeling the same weight she now carried in her chest. Later, while preparing a small meal in the kitchen, Selene finally asked, "Who is Sam?" She didn't look at Elias when she said it. Her hands were steady, but her voice gave her away. He was sitting by the window, sharpening a blade slowly, deliberately. The sound of metal against stone filled the space before he answered. "My brother," Elias said after a pause. "He lived here before me. Long time ago." He didn't offer more. Selene turned, drying her hands on a towel, waiting. But Elias only looked down at the knife, his jaw tense. She didn't press. Not yet. That night, Selene couldn't sleep. The house creaked around her, unfamiliar sounds that seemed louder in the dark. She sat up, pulling a shawl around her shoulders, and walked barefoot down the hallway. The back room was still open. The coat was still there. But now she noticed something else. A drawer slightly ajar beneath the window bench. She knelt down and opened it fully. Inside were folded letters, worn thin, their edges frayed like they'd been read 100 times. She took one out. The handwriting was heavy, emotional, not like Elias's at all. It began, "Dearest Sam, I don't understand why you had to go. They said it was your choice, but I don't believe them. Nothing makes sense anymore." The letter was unsigned. Footsteps creaked behind her. Selene stood quickly, heart pounding. Elias was there, watching her from the doorway. He didn't speak at first. His eyes moved from her to the letter in her hand. "You shouldn't read those," he said quietly. But there was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. Selene clutched the paper, her pulse racing. "Then tell me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me why this house feels like it's grieving someone who never left." And for a long moment, Elias just stood there, silent, still, before turning and walking away. The next morning brought no peace. Selene moved through the house like a ghost, quiet, careful, and alert. Something had shifted between her and Elias, though she couldn't name it. He no longer avoided her eyes. In fact, he watched her now, not with suspicion, but with the wariness of someone who feared something might break, and knew it would be his fault if it did. She returned to the drawer twice that day but didn't open it. The weight of the letter she had read still hung in her chest. "They said it was your choice, but I don't believe them." The words had clung to her dreams. Selene didn't know who wrote it, or what had happened to Sam, but she knew this. Someone had lied, and if Elias wouldn't speak, the house would have to. Later that afternoon, she found Elias fixing the fence behind the barn. The sun made him look older, like years of grief had settled into his skin. She approached slowly, her voice calm but sharp. "Was Sam your older brother?" Elias wiped his hands on his jeans, hesitating before nodding. He was the firstborn, smarter than me, louder. People liked him more. His voice cracked, just barely. He left years ago, never came back. Selene studied his face. He left? Or disappeared? Elias met her eyes. I said what I said. That night, the silence at dinner was suffocating. Every clink of the fork was a scream. Selene wanted to shout, to demand the truth. But instead, she sat with perfect posture, chewing food she couldn't taste. She noticed Elias staring at the empty chair across from her. Not at her, not at the food, at the chair, as if someone else still sat there, as if someone never really left. After Elias went to bed, Selene returned to the back room. She opened another letter, her hands trembling. I hear them talking at night, about sending you away, about how things look. They don't care about the truth, Sam. They only care about keeping things quiet. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was a cover-up. Punishment. Something happened in this house, and it wasn't just shameful. It was cruel. As she folded the letter back into place, something moved behind her. A floorboard groaned. She turned sharply, but the hallway was empty. Still, her chest tightened. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. For the first time since arriving, she felt something more than dread. She felt watched. And deep inside, Selene knew. If she kept digging into Sam's past, she might finally understand why Elias married her. But she also knew some truths don't come without a cost. The rain came without warning, soaking the fields and hammering the roof like it was trying to wake the house from its long sleep. Selene stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the trees sway violently. It felt right, the storm outside mirroring the storm within her. She hadn't spoken to Elias since reading the second letter. Not really. The few words between them had been short, guarded, and heavy with what wasn't being said. Elias was in the barn, as always when the weather turned. He worked with his hands when he couldn't work with his heart. That much was clear. But Selene was done pretending the silence could hold. She had come here for a life. Instead, she found herself standing in someone else's memory, wearing someone else's grief like a second skin. And now she wanted answers. She waited until dusk, then stepped outside into the mud. Her dress clung to her legs as she crossed the yard to the barn. The heavy door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, Elias was oiling a tool, his back turned. The scent of hay and steel hung thick in the air. He didn't look at her. You're not going to tell me, are you? She asked, voice steady but low. About Sam. About why this house feels like a grave. Elias froze. The oil can in his hand hovered mid-air. Slowly, he set it down, then turned. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were dark. Not angry, not sad, just hollow. You shouldn't dig into things that aren't yours, he said quietly. I live here now, Selene replied. I married you. Whatever's buried here, it's mine too. The barn fell silent again, but now the silence was charged. Elias stepped closer, not threatening, but closer than he had ever come. You think you understand something, he said, voice rough. You read a few letters, find a name in the dust, and you think you've got the story. He laughed once, bitter. You don't know anything. Selene's heart pounded. Then tell me, give me the truth, because I wake up every day in a house that mourns a man no one talks about. And I feel like I'm married to a shadow. Elias stared at her for a long moment. Then he whispered, almost to himself, You don't marry into this family. You inherit its silence. And with that, he brushed past her, stepping into the rain like it might wash something off him. Selene stood alone in the barn, her skin cold, her mind racing. The first crack had opened, and from it, something dark was beginning to seep out. The storm didn't stop. For 3 days, the rain poured over the land, flooding the low fields and turning the dirt roads to rivers. The farmhouse groaned beneath the weight of water and time. Selene barely left her room. She spent her hours staring at the walls, listening to the wind rattle the windows, and reading the letters one by one. The drawer had been full, each envelope another piece of someone's broken truth. Sam had loved someone. He had wanted to stay, but something or someone had forced him out. The letters never said it outright. They spoke in shadows and implications. They won't accept it. They said it was wrong. I don't want to disappear, but if I stay, I'll ruin everything. Selene didn't need the details to know. She had seen that kind of fear before, in herself, in others. Sam hadn't simply left. He had been erased. On the third night, she confronted Elias again. The power had flickered out, leaving the house in candlelight. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold coffee, when she placed the final letter in front of him. "This isn't about privacy anymore," she said. "This is about truth." Elias didn't look up. "You wouldn't understand." "I do," she replied. "More than you think." He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there wasn't anger. It was guilt. Heavy, old, and unbearable. "My father gave him an ultimatum," Elias said. "Stay here and live a lie, or leave and be forgotten." Sam couldn't fake who he was, so he left, and my parents told everyone he'd run off to start over. Selene swallowed hard. "But he didn't start over, did he?" Elias shook his head. "He never made it out of this county." The silence between them thickened until it nearly choked the room. Selene stepped back, her voice shaking. "You knew." "I was 16, Elias said. "I watched them tear him down. I watched my mother burn his photographs. I kept his letters because I was too much of a coward to fight for him." Selene's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. "You kept their lie alive. You helped bury him." Elias stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor behind him. "I married you because I thought, maybe if I gave someone else a life here, I could make up for what I didn't do for him." Selene stepped back, stunned. "You didn't marry me for me." His voice cracked. "I married you to forget." The candle between them flickered violently before going out, leaving them in the dark. And in that darkness, there were no more secrets, only the weight of what had been lost, and what might still be saved. The morning after the storm broke with a strange, unfamiliar quiet. The wind had died, the rain had stopped, and for the first time in days the house felt still, not empty, but holding its breath. Selene stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the flooded fields. Her hands were dry, her eyes even drier. She had cried everything out the night before, and now only the truth remained. Raw, exposed, and waiting. Elias entered the kitchen without a word. He looked older, not in his face, but in his posture, like the truth had peeled away the last of his defenses. He poured himself coffee and didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching her. "I should have told you before we married," he said. Selene turned to face him. "You should have told me before you let me into this house, into that room, into a life that didn't belong to either of us." He nodded slowly. "I didn't think I deserved to explain. I thought if I kept going, maybe it would all fade." "And did it?" she asked, voice calm but sharp. Elias looked down. "No. Followed me. It still does." The silence that followed was not angry. It was heavy with grief. Not just for Sam, but for everything that had grown twisted in his absence. Later, Selene packed her suitcase. Each item folded with quiet purpose. Not out of rage, but clarity. She couldn't stay just to help Elias carry a ghost. She couldn't erase his guilt, and he couldn't fill his brother's absence with her presence. At the door, Elias stood again, the same way he had stood on their wedding day, still and unsure. "I know I have no right to ask," he said, "but I hope you'll come back, when you're ready, if you're ever ready." Selene held his gaze. For the first time, she saw him not as a stranger, not as a broken man, but as someone still trying, still carrying something he could barely hold. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped outside, letting the morning sun touch her face. The air smelled like wet earth and pine. The land was quiet, but no longer mourning. Something had shifted. She didn't leave that day. Instead, she returned to the back room. She opened every letter and read them out loud. To the walls, to the wind, to Sam, wherever he was. She let the house hear the truth it had buried. And in doing so, she gave the silence a voice. For the first time since her wedding, Selene didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. She felt like someone who belonged. Not because of what was lost, but because she chose to stay. Weeks passed. The rain stopped for good. The land dried, and with it, so did the tension that had once filled every room in the farmhouse. Selene began to take small ownership of the space, not by changing it but by understanding it. She didn't move the coat. She didn't throw away the letters. She left them where they were, like graves that no longer needed to be hidden. The house didn't haunt her anymore. It remembered, and that was different. Elias changed too. Not all at once, and not in ways that others would notice. He still rose early, still worked the fields, still said little. But his silence softened. He began asking Selene if she wanted tea instead of just making it. He left the door open when he sat on the porch. He started adding Sam's name into conversations, gently, like testing if it would hurt. It still did, but less. One morning, Selene found him sitting in the back room, a letter in his hand. He looked up, startled, but didn't hide it. Instead, he held it out. "This was the last one," he said. "The one I never read." She sat beside him, and together they unfolded the paper. Sam's words were messy, rushed. "I never blamed you, Eli. Not once. I just needed to be where I could breathe. If you're reading this, I hope you finally found air too." The letter didn't offer closure. Not fully. But it gave Elias something he never thought he'd have. Forgiveness. And for Selene, it gave her a reason to stay. Not out of duty. Not out of pity. But because she had witnessed a family's buried grief rise to the surface and change something. Maybe it had changed her too. That Sunday, Selene returned to the church. She didn't sit in the back, and she didn't hide behind her mother's expectations. Vera Langdon had tried to turn Selene's silence into obedience. But silence, Selene had learned, could be something else: resistance, healing, truth. After the service, when Vera approached her with a cold smile and a low whisper, Selene only nodded once and walked away. Back at the farmhouse, she found Elias in the garden, digging a small plot near the back fence. "For vegetables," he said, "or maybe flowers. You pick." Selene stood beside him for a long moment, then took the shovel from his hands. "We'll do both," she said. "Something that feeds. Something that remembers." The house behind them no longer felt heavy. It breathed with them, lived with them. It didn't forget what had happened, and neither did they. But now the weight wasn't silence. It was memory. And memory, when finally spoken, could become something else entirely. Peace.